Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Today's episode is brought to you by Your Clear Next Step in the Changemaker Certification Program.
Would you like to save time by solving the right problem sooner with a realistic and measurable plan? Reduce overwhelm by finding more sustainably productive ways to work? Improve employee morale by creating more positive workdays from within? Stay competitive by tightening your turn or increasing your agility in adapting to changing customer demands? If you said yes to those things, then we have the solution for you.
Interested in becoming a changemaker? Give us a call at 515-442-0545.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Even Better podcast. This is your host, Sinikka Waugh, and I'm so delighted that you chose to listen in on another episode. Thank you for joining us. This is part of our ongoing mission here at Your Clear Next Step to help us all have even better workdays so that together we can co-create better communities. And I am delighted to welcome our guest, Debra Rienstra. Debra, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's so nice to be with you, Sinikka. Thanks for having me today.
Well, and for those of you who don't know Debra, she is a longtime faculty at Calvin, and she has recently published her newest book is the Refugee of Faith: Seeking Hidden Shelters, Ordinary Wonders, and the Healing of the Earth. And there are some things I have known her peripherally, and we've been in a couple of conversations over the years, and I'm just so delighted to have this opportunity to bring her here on the show and visit with her, hear more about her stories. First off, things that we share in common, a love of English. I knew for sure, I just knew when I went into pursuing my undergrad degree that I too was going to be an English professor. I am not doing that, but she is, so I want to hear all about that. I studied British Lit and French Lit. I was going to be an English professor. She got to do that, so I want to hear all about that. But the things that she is doing right now as she pursues her passion and as she helps people understand, even you can hear it in the title, Ordinary Wonders, how we can be delighted in and captivated in and enthralled in and healed in the ordinary. And I can't wait to hear this discussion and how it has emerged in her passion and her faith and the journey of her faith and how that shows up in the work that she does. So Debra, I'm so excited. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to be the author of multiple books and the published in all sorts of academic places, essays and poems and literary essays. And a research advisor in lots of places. Tell us a little bit about your story and what brought you to today.
Yeah, thank you. Well, early in life, I felt I was passionate about the arts and literature. So writing as one of the arts, and always had a tendency toward writing. Loved books. One of those little kids that would leave the library with an armful of books and complain that it wasn't enough, and have a hard time giving them back to the librarian when it was time to return them. So I've always been passionate about that, always been passionate about the arts, even though I didn't really grow up in an artsy household. My parents didn't know anything about it. It was just this sort of inner drive for me to get involved with music and with literature. So that was how I found my career as an academic in English literature, as you suggested. And that has been a beautiful, beautiful way to spend my life. And I think I was sort of lucky to be able to have that kind of professor life. It's a lot harder now than it was even when I graduated from graduate school in 1995, finished my degree. So I'm really, really lucky, and I don't take that for granted that I get to read the same texts over and over. I get to read Shakespeare plays over and over with students, and it's new and fresh and different every time. I read the Aeneid and the Odyssey and other great works of literature, as well as new literature, new books. So that has been a joy. I've always been involved in music. I've always been an advocate for the arts at Calvin University, which is a big ask because every small university has limited resources. And so fighting for resource allocation toward the arts has always been a passion. One of the nice things, though, about being further along in your career is that you can sort of leverage your institutional capital to move into new passions.
Mm.
And that's kind of what happened to me maybe 8 or 10 years ago. And it came through books. I started reading nature writers. I started reading writers about the climate crisis in particular, so that we could invite people to our Festival of Faith in Writing at Calvin. And that got me convicted that this whole climate crisis thing was really serious and really important, and that it needed to be addressed and attended to by people of faith as well as other people. So that was, sort of the people, the audience, the group that I knew, whose values and understanding of things I knew. So more and more, I started hanging out with my science colleagues and rediscovered my own passion for Michigan, where I have lived most of my life, not all my life, but most of my life. And especially how much I have loved the Michigan Lake Shore. So the western portion of Lower Peninsula of Michigan on Lake Michigan. Always loved that. My mother loved it too. Not that we knew anything about it. We just loved going there. So, being an academic, I thought, all right, well, I need to learn. I need to learn about dunes. I need to learn the names of the plants and birds and animals in my region. I need to learn, sort of the wounds of what's going on in Michigan, as well as the virtues and beauties. So I just got more and more involved into that new passion.
Mm.
And because I have some experience at Calvin, I could sort of shift my teaching a little bit. I could start shifting what I was doing with my reading and writing and research in order to answer this new passion.
Oh, so this is so fascinating to me because I have to go back to what I thought I knew about you, and it is today that I'm learning how long your career was as an English professor, as a member of the English faculty. Because I think I knew that just before the interview, we were talking a little bit about your music interests as well, and I knew that, right? I knew that you played with the Des Moines Symphony at the time, and I knew that. And in my mind, you were already something sciency. There was something sciency about you, which is really interesting. And so now to learn that this interest in science came later, and that wasn't really the pursuit before. What's interesting to me about this is that what you're telling us is that at some point later in your career, at some point later in your journey, after being established at some time in a career journey, there was this intentional moment where curiosity came to play, and a moment there was an event, a thing, a thing happened. But in your case, it was an event that was happening. Curiosity, some sort of spark, a catalyst that took place that caused you to say, "Hey, I wonder. I wonder if." And it caused you to then bring together a couple of different elements of who you are, of your natural curiosity, of your natural interest, your natural passions, to now pursue something additional,
Mm,
something that weaves together. You didn't leave the English department, right?
correct.
You're still in the English department.
Oh,
You
yeah.
still teach Shakespeare. You
Yes,
still
I
teach
do.
literature. You still have that love. And now you've got this other thing that's blending together other passions of yours, faith, and now this science aspect, this curiosity that you went and did some research on and learned new things about, and it's bringing it together to make a difference. You're creating an impact in a different way. And so I
I'm
want to,
trying to.
well, right, right, and
Yeah,
and that's all any of us can do, right? We can
of
we can only
course.
try.
Yeah.
And I want to pause on that because for anyone listening right now, I don't know that and you were careful to say that you used some of the organizational capital that you had invested and that you had accrued over the years. And so you had this, perhaps it was a luxury, perhaps it was very intentionally curated over time. And yet, I'm going to offer for anyone who's listening, regardless of where we are in our career, I think these moments will happen for us. These
Mm,
moments will happen that we can be at maybe it's a crossroads, maybe it's a braiding of, a weaving together of the things that are divinely part of us, part of who we are, that come together and say, yes, this is who you are, and also this, and also this, and this is how you can make an impact. I don't know that we have to be boxed in to one thing.
Well, I think, curiosity is a really good keyword there. And I appreciate that summary. That was absolutely accurate. One of the great things about being in academia, especially at a smaller institution like this, is we all know each other on the faculty and we're all curious and we all welcome the curiosity of our students and of each other.
Yeah.
So when I started getting more interested in this, I had these handy dandy science people right there to sort of help me along and, point me to books. And I think, the organizational capital is really about relationships. It's about relationships built with colleagues over the years. So you know what people's passions are.
Mhm.
And when you start getting interested in something, you know where to go to say, could you tell me more? Where do I go next? And fortunately, I would say one of the things your listeners might think about too is how do the skills that I've built and the capacities and the dispositions that I've built, how do they apply to this new passion? And for me, writing, researching, evaluating sources, the kind of stuff I've been doing since graduate school, I am still doing all of that. It's just aimed in a slightly different direction. It's about slightly different topics. But I'm amazed how applicable all the stuff that not only I've done as a scholar, but the stuff I've taught my students, how to evaluate sources, how to set up quotations, how to cite your research and so on. I do that all the time. I'm just doing it about climate change. And, academics are naturally curious people, but I think we all are. We're all curious people. And it's neat to see how my skills from before that I had applied in certain ways, I can now apply in new ways that allow me to kind of move into this new space.
I love it. I love it. So how has this, because it has it become now a passion? This new pursuit of yours, is it shifting your passion? Is it becoming your passion? Has it become your passion? What
Oh,
how
it's
do you
too late.
define
It's
that?
definitely become my passion, even obsession. But that's not to say I'm not still committed to the things I've always loved. I'm still committed to the arts. I still play my viola. Um, I am serving now as co-director of the Arts Collective at Calvin, which is a cohort program for students. So I'm still very much involved in the arts at Calvin and advocating for them. But the cool thing is now I can apply my love of literature and my abilities as a writer and researcher to this new passion, and also build on my sort of lifetime of being in faith communities to build new networks and to address this passion in a way that only people with my experience can do. So I'm trying to do what only I can do, right? Not only me personally, but only people with my sort of combination of experiences and networks and senses of audience. So yes, this has become an obsession, and that can be even a little bit problematic because when I'm thinking about climate change all the time, it's a passion that has its downside. It can be very discouraging.
Yeah. So I want to follow two threads there, so I'll come back to the second one on the discouragement side. But before I let this other one go, you said something interesting just now that I want to follow up on. The idea that you are aware of the fact that you are put in a position that is somewhat unique, and
Mm.
you are being a good steward of that uniqueness. Those weren't your words, that my interpretation of your words, but that doing something that only people with your particular set of circumstances can do, to then use another way of phrasing that might be using the platform that's available to you, right?
Yeah. So one of the things, just as an example, I would say is I know a lot of people in the sciences, but they're not all, but many of them are Christians.
Mhm.
And so they often will have two sort of twin anguishes. One is that the other Christians they know are not interested in science, or they might even be hostile to it. And they themselves are not trained as communicators. And so there's this sense of, oh, if I could only, help people understand. And so one of the things I see as my role is to be like a science explainer. So I've always liked science, as you say. It's not like I've never been one of these English people who's like, oh, I hate math, I hate science. No, I've always liked it. I just was more passionate about writing at that moment when I was choosing a major and a career. So I love learning about science now, and in particular biology and atmospheric physics a little bit. If you're going to do climate change, you kind of get into all the trouble. But what I most love is trying to help other people understand, and especially people whose basic values I understand as fellow people of faith. So that's kind of the space that I'm in. As you say, it's the gifts I have, the gifts of experience, the gifts of abilities, and putting in my 10,000 hours and way more. So that's what I'm trying to do. We're all trying to do our part, and partly that's a matter of discerning what are my assets here.
Yeah. Yeah, you bet. So now I want to go back to that other thread that you started on, that sometimes in this passionate field that you've chosen, sometimes that can be discouraging. I imagine in the work that you're in, there are days of discouragement.
Yeah,
What
I
do
have to
you?
read the news, and that's just hard right now. um, I I think most people, when they start really learning about the climate crisis and the scope of it and what it means and what it threatens, um, there's often a period of real despair and a sense of betrayal. Like, why haven't I been told this more? Sometimes people have been, subject to misinformation. Uh, why haven't I had the truth about this? And then you go through this kind of despair. But if you stick with it and you start to make connections with other people who've been here for a while, that despair, it doesn't totally go away, but it becomes manageable because you're too busy to be despaired. You're being despair. You're too busy learning about the amazing things people are doing. You're too busy learning about good change. You're too busy communicating about it and doing things about it. So I think the way I've sort of dealt with this, and the reason I have to follow the news so closely is I do this newsletter every 2 weeks. So, I read all the climate news, so you don't have to. And it's
Thank you.
aimed at, and there are other people who do this too, but my newsletter is particularly aimed at faith groups, people of faith, not necessarily just Christian, but people of faith. So I look for stories that relate climate change to religious groups and what they're doing. So anyway, that's why I have to read the news. So, I have curated my news feed here. So I always have this IV drip of good news. And I'm very carefully dosage controlling the bad news. And one of the things, I think I've learned through this just as a writer and researcher and a regular citizen is that the sort of legacy media is kind of the top surface of news. And to really get the good stuff, you got to dive under to the experts who are doing the work, doing the science, doing the research, doing the really good sort of on the job journalism in a particular space. So it's been interesting to find that that's the case. And I think that's the case more and more now, that if you really want to know about a particular topic, you kind of have to know who the really good sources of information are. So anyway, just curating that has been helpful. But even more than that, meeting other people who are doing the same work, have the same passion, expanding my networks of those people is so encouraging. I have never in my life met so many amazing, beautiful people. And then just taking action. Action itself is hope. Action is an antidote to discouragement. So, for me, this is about climate change, and maybe for others, you might be discouraged about other things. But, to sort of, it's not just self-care. It's really, it's like attention space care, so that you're curating it to know the truth, but also to have kind of a full picture, so it's not all doom and gloom all the time. And there really is good news. There really is good news about climate change. It's still hard. We're not going to solve it. It's not going to be cured. Things are going to be harder, but there is also a lot of good news too.
There is. Well, and I think one of the things that I appreciate about the work that you do and about the things that you just shared there is that when one gets overwhelmed, right? When one gets discouraged, it would be easy to sit down in a corner somewhere and wring hands or curl up under a blanket and say no thank you. And well, we all have our no thank you days.
Mhm.
That response to whatever discouragement we're facing, no thank you days in perpetuity is not that's not going to cut it. That's not how we bring ourselves back out of discouragement. That's not how we make a lasting difference. And so whether in your case you're working specifically at the intersection of world impacting things, and
Yeah.
for those who are working with perhaps local situations or workplace situations or something on a smaller scale, the days to be overwhelmed, yes, we'll have those days. And grace and space
Yeah.
to have those days. I acknowledge it. We
Yep.
feel it. We all feel it. And to your point, there is hope in action, and
Mhm.
and there is hope in community. And when we find that there are others doing what we're doing, when we are find and we dig in and we say, who else is here? Who else is doing something? Who else is meeting needs? Who else is voicing their needs? Because when I find someone else voicing their needs, it turns out that either I can help or someone else is helping or stepping up to help, and together we can serve together. And there's
Absolutely.
there is
Mhm.
something there about finding that the community that restores hope and
Yeah.
restores that energy and gets us out of that, encourages even when
Mhm.
we're at our most discouraged.
Absolutely. I have my fetal position weekends every once in a while too. That's what I call them. Um, and you just, as you say, grace abounds. You have to give yourself a little grace. But yes, we need community and we need action. Those things in themselves are, therapeutic as well as productive. And I would say you mentioned the word local as well. And I would say it's really important to have local community, even if you're dealing with something huge and global. And in fact, especially if you are,
Mm,
because every global problem is experienced on a local level. It's just experienced on a million local levels.
mm.
And especially with this one, which is about place and the actual planet, we experience the planet as the square meter we're standing on, as
Right?
well as all the sort of interrelationships among people and the planet and all the different ecosystems and elements of ecosystems and so on. It's all interrelated.
Mhm.
So to know about your own local space, it feels more manageable. It is more manageable.
Mhm.
Moreover, we all have more power on a very local level than we do on certainly a federal or global level.
For sure.
Unless you're like the CEO of a gigundo company, maybe you have more power then, but
Maybe.
most of us, right? I mean, good for you, but more responsibility. But most of us experience things on a very local level. So I've been playing around with this idea of refugia. That's the title of my book, Refugia Faith, which is a biological term that refers to small places that survive in the midst of severe disturbance in nature. So places that survive a wildfire for whatever reason, little areas where a particular population of a creature has been preserved, even though all around it there's habitat destruction and so on. And that resilient strategy in nature is so instructive and helpful for us, I think, as human beings, because if we can think about building a healthy, quote unquote, ecosystem in our company, in our workplace, where we are, even in like our work team or your church or whatever, that feels a lot more doable than change the world. And yet, if you do that, and this is just think local, or act local, think globally, right? If you do that with a mind to sort of the big global issues, and with community connections to people who are working on that bigger level, or at least you work together each on your local levels, you really do start to feel like you have agency. So that local level is important to feel like you have agency and to feel like something is happening.
Mhm.
Whereas that global level is important to see, like, what are the big issues here? What is the big picture? And how can what we do on this little local level contribute to that big picture? And how can we connect to people elsewhere in the big picture who are also doing this?
Yeah. That idea of refugia, that idea comes from nature. And when I first stumbled, I think I stumbled across your newsletter, and I don't remember how I came across it, but I just fell in love instantly with the
Oh,
idea.
thank you.
You
Yeah.
bet. Thank you.
Well, it's not
Uh,
my idea, right? I'm just
oh,
sort of showing it to people going, here, this is cool. Does this
it
help?
is. It is. And it does. And so before we leave today, I want to make sure that people know how to find you and how to find that, and how to and see how that shows up in your book as well, because I imagine it has to be there. But this idea that there are these pockets, this little microcosm
Mhm.
of something that's sustained, and it lives, and it's hopeful, and it's green space, or it's alive despite the fact that everything around it is perhaps toxic even, but
Mm.
this little thing survived. And I translate that as you described it. It was in nature, and as my head went to the workplaces where I've seen these little pockets of, oh, come on, team, you can do it. There's a little pocket of health inside what might otherwise be a really toxic environment, but we can do it because this little pocket is going to make it, and then it can
Yes.
spread.
Yes, that is the hopeful part, right? And we have to keep reminding ourselves, like, refugia presume crisis all around. And there's plenty of that to go around these days. So yes, maintaining those small pockets and then hoping that they grow, as human beings, we can do this intentionally. Kind of has to happen through nature systems and nature, but as human beings, we can do this intentionally. We can create connections among refugia. Those are called corridors in biology, and that is a way that healthy refugia space can then sort of have bigger influence on a larger ecosystem. So yeah, but just realizing that refugia are often stressed spaces, but they are often joyful spaces too. And that's what keeps you going, right? That's the fuel that we run on, is joy. So to find the joy even amid trouble and anxiety and toxicity, right? That is the secret sauce. And it's so hard. But if you have other people who are trying to do this with you, even if you don't agree on everything, you can find joy there. And that keeps you going.
Absolutely. I released a training class, a 1 hour module a couple of months ago, and then we reran it because the response was so great. It was called "Find the Joy, Be the Joy," and to the point that you just made, when you find these, they are these little pockets. They're full of joy, and if you can find them, and then you can be part of that joyful experience. And I love the idea of the corridor. Of course, it makes sense. It's a corridor connecting one to the other. So go connect them, connect one joyful place to another, and help others see these joyful connections from one to another, and that will help them grow. And the connections are so clear in my head. It's the analogy is so obvious. I hope someone else is hearing it, because it's making perfect sense in my head. I hope someone else hears it too.
Yeah, good. One of the things English professors are good at is figuring out where's a good metaphor. Well, there's one for you.
There's one. Man, it's working for me. I hope that there are others who hear this and see that there is hope and there is joy in those environments, which sometimes feel pretty uncomfortable in the workplace.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And here's another application that might be helpful in the workplace, is that refugia are necessarily places of adaptation.
mm,
So one of the things, they are places that are adapting to this new disturbance, this new stress. So they may come out of the period of extreme stress looking a little different than what that area was like going in. And likewise, in the workplace, they can be places of prototyping. So that's one of the ways we talk about it more on human terms, right? They are places of the sandboxes, right? Where you try something, experiment, you're adapting, you're trying to create healthy adaptations. And there's a lot of trialing and erroring. We think of it that way in human terms. In nature, things die, things live, right? That's the trial and error.
That's the trial and error.
That's kind of the result. So for us, we can do this very deliberately. So maybe thinking about, prototyping in a small space, trying out different adaptations, and then allowing that to be a model for other small spaces that will then connect.
Lovely. Lovely. Oh, I hope as listeners, I hope you're finding things that you can take from this. I going back to the beginning in the beginning of our conversation, you talked about curiosity. There was also a level of vulnerability there in your willingness to ask for help and to ask and to inquire of your friends. You said they were part of your network and you knew who was interested in what, and so you said, "Well, tell me how to help me. Where do I go next?" And that involved a level of vulnerability. And now you're talking about this idea of prototyping, which is testing and trial and error. So now my head is going to the psychological safety that is involved in this. And as we're building teams and as we're experimenting, the creating spaces where it's okay to be curious, it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to not have the answers, it's okay to try, and it's okay to not quite get it right. It's okay to adapt. It's okay to adjust. Yeah. And we're doing that in the pursuit of something that we're passionate about. We're doing that in the pursuit of hope, in the pursuit of better, in the pursuit of life, in the pursuit of something great.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's where I think both art and science have in common the practice of iteration. So in the scientific method, a failed experiment is still data. Mm-hmm. And so you learn what didn't work. And that's actually really useful information. And in artistic practice, there's always iteration. I mean, sometimes people think that art just sort of, is born from the head of Zeus automatically, but no. There's and writers know this, right? There's constant drafting and revision. And that's true of the other arts as well. There's practicing, there's correcting, there's repetition and iteration. So understanding that this is just part of creativity in all fields, science and arts and business, everything, it's part of creativity, gives you a little more permission for that trial and erroring phase of things.
Indeed. Oh, what a lovely point. Knowing that we might not get it right the first time. In fact, we won't. let's just assume we don't. Mm-hmm. And if we did get something, quote, right, we can do better.
Sure.
We can do better. Let's try it again. Let's make it repeatable. Let's make it more efficient. Let's make it greener. Let's make it bigger. Let's get it even better. Oh, so Debra, tell us a little bit more about your you talked a little bit about your newsletter. Let's understand that a little bit more. What else do we need to understand about your newsletter?
Every 2 weeks it comes out. It's on Substack. And I usually have several sections. One is like what's going on with Refugia things. And that's usually about what I'm up to. Or so I'll mention, when this podcast comes out, I'll mention that. And then this week in climate news. So I try to pick a couple stories that I think are just really, really important for people to understand. That takes the longest to do because I have to sift through a lot of stuff. And I have to summarize it and quote and find the right sources and so on. And then I do a deeper dive, and that could be anything. Usually that's a longer article. This next time, I think it's going to be about this wonderful webpage that deals with myths about green energy and electric vehicles. And so it just refutes all the sort of misinformation that's out there. Very useful resource. And then I do what I call Refugia sightings. Ooh. And sometimes those are about conservation wins. So an area where there's a new conservation area, or maybe it's something cool about agrivoltaics, which is the idea of combining farming or ranching with solar energy. Or if possible, it's often about a faith group doing something really great. Maybe they're doing some urban greening project or advocating for something. I think I've got a story about feisty nuns this week who are doing some really good work, right? So people of faith doing something to build a refugia space or nurture a refugia space. And then, then there's a sort of whatever Deb feels like this time. So often I'll do a very quick book review, something I've recently read. That's probably what it'll be my next time. Sometimes it's just a photo of Lake Michigan to be like a soul cleanse for readers. I've done lots of other things. I've done little mini interviews. So that's my sort of play space every 2 weeks. So the idea is, within 10 or 12 minutes, you can, if over time you get to be more informed and I hope more encouraged about all the good work that's going on out there, trying to build a just and sustainable future.
Lovely, lovely. And now, how did that lead you? Was it the newsletter that led you to the book? Is the book something entirely separate? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I started the newsletter while I was writing the book,
Okay.
As a way to make connections with an audience.
Okay.
And I think it started out more as like I have to build my platform sort of thing. But it's kind of taken on a life of its own. I have done almost nothing to encourage subscribers, and they just sort of keep finding me. Substack is very helpful about that, but they just keep finding it. And now I feel like I have a responsibility to these people who are subscribing to my newsletter to like keep it coming. And I've learned that the practice of doing this, while difficult, is also keeping me up on climate news. So I'm much, much better informed than I would be if I weren't doing this. It's a different kind of reading than the sort of research I'm doing for the book, which is more journalistic, interviewing people, as well as reading lots of academic books. So it's a different kind of research and a different approach too. The newsletter is much more newsy. The book that I wrote before and the book I'm currently writing, which is the sequel to Refugia Faith. Yeah, this one will be called Refugia Church. It's also going to come out with Fortress early 2027 is the plan. And those are more narrative, more theoretical, more theological. There's a lot more nature writing in both books. So it's just a different format and maybe a different audience, but there's definitely crossover. I think of the Substack newsletter as like a service I provide that, also it's my tithing of my time, I guess, my tithing of my time. Every 2 weeks I take a day and do it. And it has its rewards for me, but it's mostly become a sort of service I provide because it's important and because I have the time. All of this, I think this is probably something I should mention. This shift in passion for me was enabled by the fact that my kids grew up. So
that'll do it.
Those teenage years, man, I was probably had a second full-time job, right? Just managing teenagers and taking them to their stuff and everything. So it's a different phase of life. And I think that's important too, just to recognize that different things are possible at different phases of life.
And thank you for that. Because if you're listening to this and you are home in the sticky and you've got toddlers and you've got the years ahead of you of trying to keep up with toddlers and then middle schoolers and then high schoolers, just sit tight. It's okay. You don't have to have 3 careers as well. And
Absolutely.
Please sit tight. It's okay. Your time will come.
Civilizing small human beings is a huge gift to the world. So yeah, you're doing good work.
And good and important work. Oh man. So as we begin to wrap up here, what kinds of we've covered lots of topics and transferable things, both things that I think if someone is interested in climate action and they're a person of faith or in whatever walk of life they may find themselves, I think someone might be curious enough to pursue a further conversation with you from here. We've talked about passion, we've talked about careers and career path and how that might take us. And what haven't we touched on that you would want us to, or how would we want to wrap this up in? Where do we want to bring this together, Deb?
That's a good question. I think as I reflect on all of this, including our conversation, I'm just grateful that as I get older, I can keep learning and growing. And I would hope that's a disposition that we try to nurture in our students at Calvin University. And I hope that's a gift we try to nurture as a society, that we keep growing and that we stay curious and humble, and even amid trouble, find joy with each other. I say that as a melancholy person, it's not easy for me, but I am so grateful that I have the opportunity to keep growing and learning. That's life, and especially meeting new people and networking with new people. That has been such a gift. And so I would say, just the expectation and the cultivating of that continued growth is where I would want to land this, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. And that is right in alignment with where we are as an organization and what we encourage people to pursue, right? That's how we become even better, is with that pursuit of the curiosity where we started, and the co-creating greatness around us, which is what I think your Refugia concept is. How do we find and grow that greatness around us? Yes, I love this. Okay, so this would not be the Even Better podcast if I did not ask you my trademark question, which is, what's making you even better these days?
Learning from people who are really experienced and wise in other fields. So,
Mm.
yes, science, but I'm thinking in particular right now of organizing.
Ooh.
I'm learning so much from organizers, especially really experienced organizers. So people who write policy and organize support for policy, organize days of action, and the patience of these people. I'm learning that change, so we can go back to the subject of change. I'm learning that change is so hard and takes so long and takes such grinding patience. There are policy changes having to do with various energy policies and so on that have taken 20 years. The undamming, I'm sorry, that sounds bad, but the removal of the dams
Right?
on the Klamath River out west, that took decades to arrange, and now it's bearing fruit. So that what I'm learning from really wise and brilliant and patient people is making me even better, even in the midst of a situation, the climate crisis, which is very urgent. Just to see the wisdom of these other people and their patience with making change happen.
Mm. Oh, to spend time in the company of wise and brilliant and patient people. Mhm. Lovely, lovely. Thank you. Well, Deborah, if people from our audience would like to find you, of course, they can reach out to us and we will connect them with you happily. How else would you like them to find you?
I do have a website. It's DebraRienstra.com, DebraRienstra.com. It is undergoing a total makeover overhaul right now, so it might be a little wonky, but within a month or so of our recording time here, it should be looking gorgeous. And then Refugia newsletter, refugianewsletter.substack.com is how you can find my newsletter, or just Google Refugia newsletter, Refugia. And you can find me there, and you can find email and contact information for me on my website.
Fantastic. Deborah, thank you. Thank you so much for making time for us today. I am so grateful for this chance to visit with you.
It was a delight, Sinikka. Thank you.
Thank you. And to those of us who were listening, thank you so much for tuning in. And on behalf of all of us here at Your Clear Next Step, we hope the rest of your day is even better.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.